The rain was coming down in sheets, pelting the tin roof like 1,000 desperate fists pounding to get in. Lightning tore across the sky, lighting up the narrow gravel driveway that curled like a snake up to the old farmhouse on the hill. I stood in the kitchen with the lights off, just me, the storm, and the quiet hum of the refrigerator that had somehow outlived 2 presidents and a marriage. I could feel it in my bones. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just the weather. No, this was something deeper, something darker. A feeling I hadn't had since the war. That instinct, that stillness right before something breaks. I leaned on the counter, the cold edge pressing into my hip, and sipped my black coffee. I kept it strong and bitter, like most of the things that had kept me going. Outside, a pair of headlights cut through the downpour, sweeping across the oak trees lining the drive. I didn't have to look. I knew who it was. Trevor, my son-in-law. Trevor always drove too fast, too eager, too smug in that leased Mercedes. He was the kind of man who smiled too wide and asked questions just to answer them himself. On the outside, he looked like every father's dream for his daughter. Handsome, well-groomed, articulate. But I saw through that veneer the first time he shook my hand. He gripped too tight, the kind of tight that said, "I want you to know I think I'm better than you." He wasn't, and he never would be. My daughter, Emily, fell for him during her last year at university. She had a kind heart, too kind. She believed people were good at their core. She thought she could save him from his past, from his pride, from whatever demons he carried like a briefcase. I knew better. I kept my mouth shut, at least at first. I learned long ago that warnings only push people closer to danger. So I waited, and I watched, and Trevor, being exactly who I thought he was, got greedy. It started small. 1,000 here, 500 there, an investment opportunity, he'd say, or just a little cash flow issue. But I wasn't born yesterday. I kept a record of every dime, not because I needed the money. I had more than enough, but because I needed the truth. And the truth always follows the money. What Trevor didn't know, what he never thought to ask, was how I made that money. He assumed it was from my service pension, or maybe from selling off the old family farm. But that was just a story I let him believe. The real story, the one buried under decades of silence, was something I'd promised never to tell, until now. Trevor stepped inside without knocking, soaked from the storm, but still carrying that air of entitlement like an expensive cologne. He peeled off his coat and tossed it on the chair, ignoring the hook by the door. "Hey, Pop," he said, flashing that wolfish grin. "Thought I'd drop by. Emily said you weren't feeling too well. Everything all right?" His voice was casual, but his eyes were scanning the room, noting the safe tucked behind the painting, the drawer where I kept the keys, the hallway leading to the basement. He wasn't here to visit. He was here to take. I played along, yeah. I said, my voice gravelly, just a little cold, comes with the season. He nodded and walked over to the safe, pretending to admire the painting of the Smoky Mountains above it. "You ever think about upgrading this thing?" he asked. "You know, digital keypad, biometric lock." I looked at him over the rim of my mug. "I prefer the old ways." He chuckled, turned, and tried to mask his real reason for being here, but I already knew. You see, 6 weeks earlier, I started planting seeds, subtle things, mentions of a long, forgotten account. A trust fund, hints that maybe, just maybe, there was more money than even Emily knew about. and Trevor, God bless him, took the bait like a hungry catfish. He started showing up more often, asking questions he thought were clever, and I answered every single one. Because sometimes the best way to catch a thief is to leave the door wide open. That night, after he left, I opened the safe myself, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to be ready. Inside was a small wooden box, old hand, carved with brass hinges worn from time. It wasn't locked. It didn't have to be, because what was inside wasn't just money. It was a past I'd kept buried since the day I walked away from a life I barely survived. Back in '78, I wasn't just a farmer. I was something else entirely. Intelligence officer, black operations, the kind of work that doesn't show up in resumes or history books. I did things, saw things, some that haunt me still. And somewhere along the way, I intercepted a man carrying more than weapons. He had information, names, accounts, and one key, a master key that opened a vault in Zurich, where a very dangerous man kept his very dirty money. I was told to turn it in. I didn't. Instead, I disappeared, changed my name, bought the farm under a shell corporation, married a woman who made me believe I could live a normal life, and I tried. God knows I tried, but when she passed, something in me died too. Emily kept me going, but even she didn't know everything. Only the box knew, and Trevor was about to find out. 2 nights later, I left the safe open and forgot to set the alarm. Then I took my truck and drove to the diner in town, stayed just long enough for Trevor to take his shot. When I returned, the box was gone, and the game had begun. The next few days were quiet. Emily was worried, said Trevor hadn't come home. I told her not to worry, told her he was probably just out networking, like he always said, but I knew better. Because I was tracking him, not just through GPS, but through the box. You see, I wasn't stupid, that box. It had a hidden chip in the bottom, one I installed years ago, just in case. It pinged every 6 hours through a satellite signal, military grade. Trevor flew to Europe, landed in Zurich, and he made it to the vault. But what he found wasn't what he expected. There was no fortune waiting, no bags of unmarked bills, no stacks of bearer bonds. What he found was something far more dangerous, a list. One that hadn't seen daylight in decades, names of operatives, contacts, leverage, and one name at the bottom. Mine. That's when things got interesting, because the people who once wanted that list, they were still watching, still waiting, and when Trevor showed up using my credentials to access the vault, he might as well have lit a flare in the middle of a minefield. They came for him. I watched from a cafe across the street, sipping espresso like an old man too tired to care. But inside, I was steel, ready, waiting. I didn't interfere, not right away. Sometimes a man has to learn the cost of betrayal. But when they dragged him out, confused, terrified, screaming my name, I made the call, one last favor, one last clean up. Trevor was found 2 days later in a hospital outside Milan, shaken, silent. He wouldn't tell the doctors what happened, wouldn't speak to the press. Emily flew out to bring him home. She didn't ask me for the truth, and I didn't offer it. But Trevor, he never stepped foot in my house again. He left Emily a month later, no warning, no note. Just vanished, and maybe that was for the best, because some men are born with fire in their hands, and some are born just to burn. As for me, I put the box back where it belonged. Then I buried it deep, not in the ground, but in the place where memories go to sleep. Some truths, you see, aren't meant to be passed down. They're meant to be carried, alone. And if there's one thing I've learned in all my years, it's this. Trust is not something you give. It's something you guard, because once it's broken, once it's stolen, what you get back is never the same. Just like Trevor, and just like me.